Everybody, this is Charlotte Kevenin of the Sisters of Ra. I will be interviewing my dearest soul sister, AshRa.
Hi.
She is her beautiful self. Hey, girl.
Hey, sister.
How you
Hey,
doing?
everybody. How are you doing today, sister?
Actually, I did pretty good. It was not bad. How's it over there in beautiful Florida?
Well, we are having really beautiful weather this week. It's been in the 80s and got to go to the beach and do a beach activation.
Oh,
And
cool. Do the kids go with you?
of course, we
Good.
always want our kids to be involved with being around Mother Earth and working with their aquatic gifts. We also got to take the singing bowls. We were going to record it, but the something about the phone wanted to die very soon. So we still got to do our beach healing and where we just send love into the grid and into the water and any of the kids or anyone that's around there. So very beautiful week.
I'm so glad to have you here. This could be a really good interview. Very informative, I feel also as well.
I am so grateful that we are finally getting our Sisters of Ra podcast going. And the more, our intention is, just to be of service to the collective in whatever way we may, for especially the children right now, and to lift each other up as well as we are all rising.
Yeah, we're all rising. So tell me about your very eclectic childhood. How was your childhood like?
Okay, so I was born on January 11th, 1989.
Good number.
They did not know if they thought that because I was such a large child, that I was going to be a boy. And
Another one.
so both of my almost similar what had happened, I believe with you. Well, yeah, there was a time period where my parents both thought that I was going to be a boy, and turns out, nope, it's a girl. And I ended up being a only child. My father worked for Exxon, an engineer, and he was involved in Exxon my whole life until about 1995, when we moved I was born in Elk City, Oklahoma, and don't remember much of it, but other than the snow and slipping on ice and being scared of Santa Claus, and Easter grass, random memories here. And then we moved to Louisiana and lived about an hour and a half from Baton Rouge, about 2.5 hours from New Orleans, in a little town called Zachary, Louisiana. And who passed away in 2010. But looking back now, I see that my mother is so much what she was going through. She was just muted, and so much of what I'm able to speak up, and you and I were speaking on how when we heal our timeline, we're going back and healing our mama's timeline. So I was a mama's girl, and always, she was my best friend, and we were very, very close, could communicate telepathically without me believing in it, even, because my belief system was programmed from the church, the Baptist church. And she kind of reminded me of Dolores Cannon a little bit, where
I can see that. Yeah,
she was very open to learning, and her major was in political science, and she graduated from LSU. And so as I grew up, I was mainly playing by myself and very highly creative imagination, always was outdoors and just grounding myself, playing in the dirt, and like not throwing it all over my face, but just digging in the dirt and drawing spirals and shapes, and not even realizing what I was doing, and then talking to the plants and mixing different little concoctions and playing I guess witch or whatever and play where
Magical things that you didn't know,
potions.
but it's
I'd
coming
be
to you
making
another
my
way. Yeah.
people were expressing that there was only one way with religion,
Mm.
that I was like, once I learned about other parts of the world, I would think, well, why would what I'm learning be true only, and other people that were born in other locations of the world, that theirs would be false just because they're in a different part or born in a different part of the world? How, if God is such a loving God, how does that make any sense that we're all fighting against each other's belief systems, but we're all believing in basically the same system?
Mhm.
And so I remember just being an overanalyst, and I have always been a writer and very creative, but used to want to tap into, I was curious about these things, about being telepathic, and Charlotte and I were talking about, there used to be a psychic like Cleo or something, psychic
Yeah, I
Cleo.
remember that. Yeah, very popular.
Yeah. So you could call in and you could pay a certain amount and she could predict the future for you. And I remember
Yeah.
my parents telling me, well, in the Bible it says that that's wrong. And so I would step away from it because, okay, well, my parents are telling me that that's bad. And I would go and learn then from other people. And as I started getting older, I noticed that there was such a resistance against this Christianity and these teachings that I had learned, but there was just as much of a religion in atheism as there was in Christianity, because it takes such commitment to try to keep proving people that that's a religion in its own, because you're indoctrinating people by the exact opposite of what the people who are beating people over the head with the Bible, well, they're beating people over the head that there is no Bible. And so I had to find a balance. After I moved from Louisiana, I was this little crazy hair little girl, curly hair. I still have crazy curly hair. But I had my cats and always was Ariel. So I was so excited when I started remembering my past lives as a mermaid, which we'll go into in a later time. But I remember thinking, like, there's got to be something more to this than this body, because I wouldn't always be here. And I still these days catch Charlotte and I will be talking. We'll just be traveling from timeline to timeline to timeline, and feeling it almost like different dimensions. So if somebody else is listening, they'd be like, wow, that's intense. But that's how it was for me as a child. I would be scanning one area, and then I would be observing somebody else, and then I would be knowing, not hearing, because the voices wouldn't come through as voices, it would come through as a presented idea. And so I would get the idea, and then I would say it and find out that that was the truth. And it freaked people out. And they said, okay, well, don't be going around and, like telling people that it was. So back to programming, is where I would be redirected back to the programming. And it wasn't, my mother would be doing like undercover studying pretty much, where she had her own Bible and I would see her read her Bible. And then I'd see her read other books. I wish I had some of the actual names, but one of them was the Law of Attraction. And another of them was a book about astrology and numerology and all of these things that were wrong. But I noticed that my mother could deter and those she could differentiate between the truth, what was being sold, and then what she felt was right in her heart, but she didn't want to stand out during those times. And she, like Dolores Cannon, the people in her life would say, oh, no, no, no. My dad would say no. So I grew up around a very strong presence in my father, who at this time period I've learned is a different consciousness completely, that it's almost like Draco consciousness, which we'll get into to explain.
That's a good way, different consciousness. Yeah.
And I called him from a little girl, I called him fire breathing dragon.
Oh, that's reason for that.
And because he would yell for no reason, and it was so quiet and things would be so still, and like then all of a sudden just to hear this really, say you spill something on the ground, like, and it's just a small thing. Well, sometimes it would be small, but sometimes it would be this big bouldering, yelling noise. And he would feel, he'd say sorry afterwards, but he was in the military or army. I know that those are very different. But so military industrial complex is what we have kind of come to the conclusion of, that he had a lot of things that he was trying to put down, back and numb out. And so I watched him numb out for years and years. And then I watched my mother, kind of just trying to come out and almost heal herself in these wounds. But then she would go to the doctors, and the doctors would put her on a antidepressant, and they would just try to take her light. And anyone that knew my mother knew how bright of a light she was. And she was the one that sent out birthday cards and anniversary cards, Easter, any holiday, any occasion, she would send everyone in the family the card. And so she was like the one in the family that like held most of the relationship dynamics together. And so after she passed away, my family and we weren't very close at all anymore. I felt very betrayed kind of by them. And I had to realize that, just because they are related to me doesn't necessarily mean that they are who I need to live my life by, who is supporting me and who is believing in me. That's the circle I should be around. But I kept attracting the wrong people because of the vibration I was around. I had to transmute a lot of negative energy. I had to transmute from my father and the energy that he carried, very strong, and still does, very strong energy. And then I didn't have many friends until I was getting older, and So I would see little imaginary friends and angels. I saw what I do believe was Lucifer when I was younger. He was so like beautiful that it scared me, because I had heard that he was one of the most beautiful angels, but they, you know how they make him look in the Bible.
Yeah.
So
They're
I,
doomed.
it scared me, but he kept coming to me, and he kept coming to me and coming to me. And then I would also, see, I, I didn't really have, any traumatic ghostly presences other than just that, remembering that a couple of dreams. So I would dream about these people burying their dolls, these scary dolls, probably after watching like the Chucky movie or something.
Oh, I can't watch those. I always bring bugaboos and entities and stuff, and I scream at my husband, "Don't watch that! You're gonna bring them in. You bring them in the house." You know.
Yeah,
I can't.
it's like there's little spirits and entities in those movies that can come through almost like little phantoms. They can,
They feel your energy.
yeah, they're fake. And so when I saw the dream that I had several times about these dolls, there were these men that were tearing apart my living room. They were digging up the living room. It was like these big piles of dirt, all in like construction in the living room. And I remember they're asking my parents in the dream what was going on, and they couldn't tell my parents. But then I overheard them talking, and they're talking about how there's this like doll buried under there that was like gonna hurt us. And so I started hearing my dolls, and they would do weird things at night. And so other than that, I got rid of the bigger dolls, and I kept my Barbie dolls. I got rid of any dolls that made noises. I used to be really afraid of the dark, and really afraid to be alone. I had to have my mother sleep with me because there would be these like darker, just at night, it would just be too dark for me. And if I could just see, you know, how you create things in your mind too, in the dark. But I always knew that there was an angelic presence with me, watching over me. I always knew that I belonged somewhere else, and that I was different. And then as I got older, I started trying to fit into a group of people that I just wasn't. So if you were to, since I had to have the routine jabs when I was younger, which isn't even near what my kids were what they wanted them to have.
Wow.
They gave me these, and my parents had said that I almost couldn't walk, that they were going to put braces on my legs because I wasn't walking straight. And so I ended up being pigeon-toed from what I'm pretty sure is a side effect from the shots that I had. And then also I used to rock back and forth.
I did that too. I did that too. Or like this. Yes. Well, we just
I would sit in the mirror and rock. Yeah. It was a coping mechanism. But I remember thinking, why am I so different than my friends? But they'd say, oh yeah, Ashley, you're weird. But they didn't understand like what was going on. I was feeling them. It was almost like I would become some of them. It was like I would take on their spirit. I would take on their ailments. I would take on their energy. And it wasn't because I wanted to, it was just something that was happening.
You're taking like a sponge.
Yeah, like a mirror. And when our beautiful teacher Aurora told us that what's
Mhm.
going on with that is that we're mirroring each other's qualities, and some people have negative, they're seeing their negative qualities reflected because because they're scared. They're looking into us and seeing back something that they're scared of because they're seeing themselves in us, but it's not us. We're showing them who they are, which we're all doing with each other.
Exactly,
But
girl. Exactly.
this was this was a huge thing for me and my friends. And I didn't understand like why, just the dynamics of growing up. So I then realized when I was about 16 years old, when all of my friends who are supposed to be like these goody two shoes are on partying and spending all their mommy and daddy's money
Oh man.
on drugs and alcohol on the weekends, and then everyone would just lie to each other and then judge each other and each point fingers, steal each other's boyfriends, and I had a lot of heartache through a lot of people because I put trust into them, and I would just trust and trust so easily. So as I got into my first few relationships, I had such an unhealthy cycle of watching these girls go through these relationships because I didn't really have a boyfriend. They always liked my friends. The boys would always want that I liked, they would end up wanting my friend because I was overweight. I didn't know at the time that I was allergic to or sensitive to all of these different foods.
Mm.
And that's what was going on with me, as well as trying to get rid of all of these different shots that I had to have. And it's almost like a mild version of autism. And I don't like diagnosing and even using that term, but looking back now, I recognize the frequencies that were that I was constantly having to battle. But even back then, our galactic family was there, and they are homies, Charlotte and I call them. They were there watching through the many years, then especially after my mother died from poor health and from stress, poor health, poor eating, and just overall not knowing the same thing, that she was allergic to all of these things, that the medicine was harming her, that she wasn't she was just as highly sensitive as I am. So once I recognized after she died that those things were happening to me, I was put on medications for depression. I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, severe anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar. And then I went, so because of these things, I was constantly trying to numb out these external energies or feelings because I didn't know how to transmute them. I didn't know what to do with or how to express myself. So I did what the doctors recommended, and that's basically Band-Aid, bandage it, cover it, mask it, and then it's not there. So I watched a lot of people die from using drugs, and I watched a lot of people go to jail. I watched a lot of people lose their families, and I just remember thinking, wow, I have to get out of Albuquerque. At 24 years old, I went through so much reckless relationships, trauma, reckless friendships and trauma. and just these abusive cycles that I was allowing because I didn't set boundaries for myself. I didn't know how to shield. I didn't know how to, I didn't know how to say no to
Yeah.
people.
A lot of it
And
has to do with the way we were raised, our culture, society, especially as women. You have to say
people
yes, you
please,
have to say yes and get through it. Just bite your lip and do it. No, we don't have to. We know our sovereign now. That's true. Yeah.
and so though there's a whole long list of sad stories and severe trauma, pain, rape, assault, different, drug use for years, and then eating disorders, and basically just having these different entities that were in, not even, I would end up transmuting them, but then I would mask it, and then I would go through cycles where I would recognize what I was doing and I'd stop, but then I'd go back around so and so, and then this would start again. I would go party, and I would try to numb out with pills, especially Xanax. That was the major thing, was got to get rid of this anxiety, got to get rid of this anxiety. I thought it was a curse, but really it was my higher self. It was God. It was the angels. It was
Source, everybody. Yeah.
source
Homies.
coming through and giving solutions, or letting me know, hey, this other person has this going on, and you may have an answer to that. Or if you don't, we're going to give you an answer to it, and you can share it with them. But I didn't put those two together because of all of the division with the medications that were tearing my energetic from my astral, from my earthly body.
It's like acid
separating
being
them
thrown
all.
at you. Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I felt a mixture of things. I felt like I overspoke, but at the same time didn't speak up. I felt as being an only child, socially awkward and weird my whole life. But then the people that I'd be close with, they'd say, oh, that's what we love about you. So then I would try to like people please and mold into being this other person, because I didn't know what I wanted. I knew I wanted to help people, but I didn't know how to help them. I knew that I wanted to help people get off of drugs once I myself got off of drugs.
Mhm.
And I recognized at a young age from having alcoholism in the family, that, and was told as well that if I drank, I would be an alcoholic. And I was taken to meetings at 17 years old,
Mhm.
to Alcohol Anonymous, AA meetings, and NA meetings by 18 years old, 17 years old, 18 years old, going to these meetings and saying, hi, my name is Ashley. I am a alcoholic.
Yeah.
I am an addict. And
Which is a
so,
label, but yes.
yeah. And so I then, like, I was never the type of person that would take from people. I would share. And so I would go to work and I would pay for things. I would go, and whatever we needed, I always believed that in somehow, some way, the universe always provided. And I just kept the faith, and the universe would always provide whatever it was. So that way I could be okay, and I could help, just even from the age of 21 to the age of 24, I had such a huge awakening,
Perfect.
because one of my exes showed me a video about Western traditional Orthodox religions and then compared them to, which really, it really upset me, or whatever was inside me, because it's like the programming, yeah, it's like, you're telling me this is all wrong. But so he says, he had showed me this video, and the guy says, you know, okay, look, there's always it's like the hero's journey, and then there's the a celebration, a rebirth, a resurrection, and all of them correlated to be the same. So from what I was thinking when I was a little girl about everybody else being right too, was right. Like it wasn't just one way. There were many ways. And so when this door was open to me, I kind of stepped back from, which I had never read the Bible fully either. And so it was incredible how once after I read the Bible, though it has been infringed upon, changed, things have been removed, things have been stored and hidden, and words have been taken out to make it look almost like it's some certain things are bad when we know that they're good. And they'll even, it's like how they said that astrology and numerology and alchemy and all these things are bad, yet it says it actually in the Bible that these are all made for, stars were made for signs and seasons and all of, so it literally says these things in the Bible, and then the people misinterpret the message, and they turn around and say, oh no, that's wrong, you're woo-woo. So I stepped out of that and started looking more into healing my body, because I had been through all of this bullying and teasing, and because I could think something mean about somebody, but I couldn't say it to them because I didn't want to hurt them. If somebody was being mean to me, I could think of a response, but I wouldn't end up saying it because I didn't want to hurt that person. So, my mother had died at the age of 21. I moved temporarily and then ended up moving back to New Mexico and partied for a few more years, blew money that I wish I wouldn't have, but it is what it is. And yeah, I had to go through some severe pain in dating relationships, and just attracted these like really, and no offense, like, but psychotic people. And so that was the vibration I was giving off, though, was because you attract, like attracts like. So I was not balanced or clear, but I would attract these very intense relationships that they would say that they were gonna, kill themselves or all this if we ended it.
So they're not okay in the head.
Yeah. And very controlling, very pretty much just abusive, verbally abusive. And so I went through a lot of verbal abuse and a lot of doubt, and a lot of people not believing in me, a lot of people telling me that you're wrong. And so I learned to start keeping my true opinions that were wacko or crazy to myself, and in turn started developing issues with my throat chakra, my thyroid. And so as the years went by, after I moved to Texas and I got out of the battlefield, the war zone, whatever, the drug war zone, I met Austin, my husband.
I approve of him. He's her twin flame. They're wonderful together.
He's like
great bro.
We've actually found out that we are twins in a galactic level as well, which as a twin flame, but as we have been together so many lifetimes that once it was weird, we got introduced by somebody who I thought that I was going to be with. and that had known my mother, and my mother was a teacher in Freer, and that's where our family is in South Texas, and such a small world that we just happened to meet randomly through this guy who was totally trying to play me. And it's so funny now how you can just say, oh, you know what? I'm so grateful that things did happen the way that they did. Because Austin and I we're like, this is weird. It's like brother and sister almost, like we could finish and complete each other's sentences. Then I recognized and learned that my husband is telepathic. And so we could communicate, but because of the medications that I had been prescribed and put on, it numbed out some of my, I guess you could call it radar, or how
your radar, what you're picking up. Yeah, it does. It dulls it, kills it.
So he was very, I remember thinking, and I'm not playing, that he was Jesus, Yeshua. I remember contemplating, and we found out through regression that of course, yes, he is. So
love that, bro. I love him.
So he's a very, very, very passionate, loving, very divine masculine. And I'm very grateful that we met. We rushed, what people would say, we rushed into things, but now the way I see it is we had already wasted all of those years doing all the other things. We didn't have more, the show, it had to begin, like it was game time. Like we had to get our mission started. So we couldn't wait any longer. We got things happened and unfolded so quickly with us, because once we were together, then that's when all of these miracles, we were both told that we couldn't have children. And guess what? We have two beautiful crystal,
bright stars, I call them.
They're little beacons of light, and
smart,
truly
open.
It's like, if you and anyone that knows me from the past knows that I was not a children person in the past. Like how far my mind has just totally, I don't recognize really who I used to be, because I was not being myself. I was not being my authentic self. I was being who everybody else wanted me to be. I was taking advice from who and caring about what my friends thought instead of what I truly wanted. And I thought that the power relied externally, not internally. And I didn't realize that my power was within me, and I was looking everywhere else for it, and then trying to numb out my inner feelings, but looking outside for the answers. And it wasn't until Austin and I we had went through some severe, we had our daughter, went through some severe traumas with hurricanes, and we had to evacuate our home. We didn't know if we were going to come back to a home. After we had Ashlyn, Ashlyn was 2 years old. Aiden was due, and I was scheduled to have a C-section. Unfortunately, didn't know much about the medical system, didn't learn too much, learned what to expect when you're expecting books, and read books like that, listened to the doctors. And so I totally, with the C-section, a little off topic here, but they had scheduled me for a C-section, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, am I gonna have to have this baby, because we had to evacuate for this hurricane, and the whole city was flooded, and it was supposed to wipe out Corpus Christi, where we were living, Austin and I. We had to take what we could fit in the van that we had at that time, one vehicle. The other was broken down, needed some parts fixing. So we had to just take one vehicle and load up our stuff, the pictures, the photo albums, records, stuff like that, and put everything up high on shelves and board up windows, put sand, and it was Hurricane Harvey. And
Oh,
this was in 2017. And so we went through the hurricane evacuation, and it turned at the very last minute. The eye was headed straight for Corpus Christi. I remember watching it on TV thinking, oh my gosh, like, no, I just knew though, no, that this isn't going to happen. Like, because, they say God won't give you more than you can handle. I definitely at that time could not have handled losing our home and everything. And so we went through that. And then after we had my son, he had a lot of things happen with him. So we went through all of that, which we've talked about in other videos. And some of this information will have to be shared on a different platform probably.
yeah, probably. Yeah. We'll do that.
But we learned that this system that we had been living in our whole life and trusting our whole life was broken, bad. And we wanted to figure out how to fix it, because that's what, Austin and I are both Capricorns. So we are strategizers that try to perfectionists almost in our own little senses, OCD in certain senses, and very
Energies
stubborn.
are just high. Energies are high. You both balance well.
It's very interesting to look back now though and see how much of these traits, the stubbornness and stuff, how it kept us just in this repetitive cycle. But now we were able to, after everything happened with our son and we relocated again, we had to get away from some things. Another situation was going on in our environment. So we moved from Corpus Christi back to New Mexico, except for not to Albuquerque this time. We moved to southern New Mexico, which Las Cruces, and which is about 45 minutes away from White Sands Missile Range and about an hour and a half from Roswell.
Wow.
In Albuquerque, they had lots of, this is another thing I forgot to mention. I went to Eisenhower Middle School, and I think it's so crazy because now if anybody else knows who Laura Eisenhower is and knows about who her grandfather is, and of course, like not just say he's the president, but actually about the military industrial complex and what he was told, what he learned during his administration, I can now look back and see that there was some consciousness that was pretty much being experimented on with my classmates. And this is another correlation, I believe, to how everyone was addicted to so many substances at such a young age, to such dangerous, really very, you would never think that these people would have these issues, but their consciousness, they were experimenting. I don't want to say the word abducting, but that's what it is. It's abducting consciousness. And then there were so many politics involved within the grand scheme of things. So I just look back now and can recognize these things. But my husband, he kind of experienced a different opposite life than me. He was brought up in the church and stuff as well, but he didn't necessarily have the The fear, maybe so much, I guess the word could be the "Rrr," in his home. His parents were very loving, and my mother was as well. My father, he is a loving being. He's just very 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 big and very loud voice. So being a little girl, and now being an adult, I recognize how much how different the dynamics for my husband and I in our parenting are, because, but we both want the same thing. Because of the way we were structured and our parents were structured. And so now it's comforting to know, though, that we're going back and speaking up for the women in our family that didn't get to use their voice, that were healers, but they were instead put into a system. And so it's still like that in my family. Some of my family still works at these places, and I'm probably I'm like the black sheep of them because of my, the conspiracy theorist. So being that I'm now able to be okay with that and know what I truly want. And that is for other people to know that these things are real and that your spiritual gifts are there. And if you want to use them, you can train and work with them, especially from a young age. So I know I've skipped and jumped around a little bit
you're
here.
doing good. You're doing really good.
But
I was just curious about your singing bowls. What got you into singing bowls? I know many of us have watched your videos here in Sisters of Ra and enjoyed it so immensely. We're just wondering, how did you get into that? And you doing that with your kids?
So yes, I originally got into the singing bowls by learning about sound healing frequency with children, as my children have not been diagnosed with anything, but children that are highly sensitive, or from what my son went through, he used to be a little afraid of loud noises. And so there's several cousins of mine that were diagnosed as autistic. So being that this runs in my family, I was like, okay, well, this is a method, not just to meditate. The first time I ever heard a singing bowl or a tuning fork, it was a tuning fork originally, but I remember my daughter taking it because I got it for myself. And I just saw on one of the shows, David Wilcock, we were watching something with David Wilcock, and we were on Gaia, and that's where I started hearing more about healing with these different methods and alternative holistic methods. And so I wanted the kids to be able to, and we want the kids to be able to have an energetic expression outlet that they can use, because since we are all made of crystals and we are all attuned to a certain frequency, and every frequency is a wave, we sometimes are shifted out of our homeostasis or our perfected attunement. And so I wanted to attune myself, and by using the tuning fork, I would envision that I'm pulling like a layer of golden light like over and around me, and I would just play with it. My daughter watched me, and she's been such a little ascended master herself.
Oh, she came in that way too. Both your kids.
She is definitely a little galactic captain as well.
Oh, she is.
She gives Akashic readings, and
I love that. It's crystals, what you need, and all that.
Yes. So had the answers, and she heard the noise, and my son as well. And when I started awakening and using crystals, they wanted to play with the crystals. And so at first I was like, oh no, don't mess with my crystals. But then I was like, oh, well, you know what? These are my little angels. Like, it's okay. So I took the singing bowl. I got a singing bowl last year, and I was playing it, and my daughter was so like, she was just calm after I played it. And I believe I think this one was the third eye one that I had.
Yeah, I think it's
And
the third eye you're telling me, yeah. But he
yeah,
just called to her on that because it's her
yeah.
frequency. Both her
And so-
children, AshRa's children, are both high. They come from the highest dimension. So when their new lifetimes coming through, it's very hard for many children who are open and high frequency. They're coming down in this 3D. It's like coming into like fitting your foot in a shoe that's 3 sizes too small. So people say,
Yes.
oh, OCD, or oh, all this stuff that they label kids too hyper. No, what it is energetically is these children's souls or frequencies are from a higher realm, higher place, which our culture society just wants to know this. So they're coming through the high frequency, try to fit. They can't fit, and then try to adjust, to try to adjust, to try to adjust. And I just love your children because they're high frequency. I feel them, I see them, I hear them when they talk to you, and I hear them play. It makes my heart happy because they are in that pure light. And I
Yes.
love their personalities. I love seeing the light in their eyes. I just
They're
love it.
so great. I was so blown away that I was given this job, this responsibility, to, and this blessing, just the opportunity alone to be able to, know what, A, finding my twin flame, B, having our daughter, which he saw. I'm going to tell you this, the first month that we were together, he had a vision of her running across because he lives by the cemetery. Yeah. His parents, they own a lot of land over there. Their whole family owns the land, but out at the very end of that road, it's called Cemetery Road. And so my mother is literally buried like behind down the road from where Austin's family lives. And this was the thing I don't think I mentioned, is Austin's grandma and my grandma went to high school together.
Oh, really? Oh, how wonderful.
Yes. And then my my mother and Austin's father worked as teachers together. And my mother was actually Austin's teacher before. And so she knew him before I knew him.
Oh, wow.
And then passed away. And then we still happened to meet. And he had made a comment or something about me because she had kept a picture up, but of me in high school. And so he said that he saw her or me as a young, he's like, either I just saw you when you were little running, or I saw our daughter. And I was just like, what? Like, just so amazed by what he could see and how spiritually activated he was. And always has been such a great teacher. And so we knew right away that was going to end up happening. And it just didn't make sense at the time for me. It didn't make sense, and I didn't see how it was going to be possible. And so the children, though, being that they are so sensitive when they aren't around all this technology, I noticed that they need a outlet, and it's not just more technology, which is what everyone else tries to do. They try to put them in front of more and more and more electromagnetic frequency waves. So my children and I are both highly sensitive to the waves, and they'll start running in circles, like literally running in circles around where we have the router modem
Yeah.
thing in the house.
Mhm.
They will run in circles in high traffic time areas during the day, like where there would be bumper to bumper traffic. If you were to think about it, if you are living in a, like over here, it's so around those times where I guess maybe people are getting off of work, or and everyone's on their phone, or what is going on, they will, they're so sensitive that they will just start running in circles and acting really impulsive, and just doing things that they know they're just doing things without thinking, and which is what kids do, right? And but I that's why I started telling my daughter, she told me, actually, let's meditate, mommy, and taught me how to put my feet. She would take her shoes off and go bury her feet out back in New Mexico. And when we were on lockdown in New Mexico, oh my gosh. So this whole time though, after I found out from many letdowns in religion, many letdowns in relationships, and pretty much a lot of hurt and pain from a lot of people that loved me and cared about me, but they were so programmed that they wanted to love their guilt more. They wanted to love their fear more. And they couldn't accept that there could be another way. And I didn't want to be the one anymore to have to tell people, look, I'm right and you're wrong, because I had been doing that for so long in this program. And so it's like people have to have their free will. So the children have to have their free will as well. And when this whole thing came out in March 2020, and we had to stay at home, we were looking for an out, because we were involved in the church over there, a Baptist church. And since we were so involved there were a lot of elderly people that we really loved. We didn't want to let them down. We were scared to. And we needed a reason, because every time we'd see them, it was just it was like the grandparents I never had, and then the mother that, had died. And so a lot of them were familiar spirits, and I could feel the goodness inside. But then when it would come to a certain topic or a political encounterment, then it would be so hypocritical to what in the contrast of what they're really even supposed to be reading or acting like in this program. So I started wondering how many people even read the Bible, or how many people just look at the paper that